Hey everyone! Welcome to the Breaking Moment podcast. My name is Regine Bowe, and I am a social worker who wants to give you hope, encourage you, and help you feel less alone in your healing journey. This podcast is dedicated to helping you heal, learn, and grow to become a better version of yourself. Through education and personal experience, I will discuss topics around mental health and spirituality. So, let's get started on today's episode. Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Breaking Moment podcast. I am your host, Regine Bowe, and welcome back. So much has happened in the last month that it's crazy. Like sometimes it seems like I need to go back to the bi-weekly because I could spend a whole episode just talking about what has happened this month. Well, I just got over being sick, which sucks. My whole house pretty much got sick. So we're all recovering. I'm feeling a lot better, thank God. And I just have been really focusing on that resting part because not only have I not felt good, but just with the demands of just work and home and the dogs and this and that, it's okay to take a break. And if you need a little reminder, I did an episode about the importance of taking breaks. And I think that's just where I've been trying to focus. It's hard for me, those that know me, it's hard for me to actually take a break and not do stuff. And one of the best treatments to when you're sick, right, is to rest. And it was so hard, but I give myself a B. I didn't do too bad. But yeah, resting. But I hope you're doing good. It's been a month. If you are a frequent listener, I do these monthly. If you're a new listener, welcome. I hope everything is going well. I hope that you are okay. And if you're not okay, that's okay. I encourage you to spend time with yourself and see what you need. One thing I've been learning is that our body really does talk to us. Our body tells us what we need. And the more that I've allowed myself the time and the space to sit with a feeling, even though it's hard, I'm not saying it's easy, it's hard, but I realized that it allows me to give my body what it needs. Like when I wasn't feeling good, I could feel it in my body. And the old Regine would have just pushed through it. I'm good. But I listened and it was like, oh no, I need to rest. The other day I felt like my cup was empty and I could feel it because I get a feeling in my chest of so much irritation. I get so annoyed with everything. If a fly buzzed in my ear, which flies are annoying, but I'm taking it. I want a one-on-one with this fly. I'm irritated. The dogs bark. I can't stand it. I just realized that in that moment, I needed to give myself time. I needed to fill my cup up. And that's okay. So I encourage you to, if you're not okay, maybe just to sit with yourself and figure out what you need. 9 times out of 10, your body's telling you what you need. Maybe it's quiet. Maybe it's you need someone to talk to. Maybe you need to cry. That is something that people don't talk about a lot. But crying really does release all that built up energy. And it when I cry, if I do that ugly cry and just let it out, I usually feel better afterwards. No, maybe the problem isn't solved, but my body doesn't hold on to all that energy and stuff. So yeah, I just, wanted to give you a little update and I just wanted to check in and I hope everything is good. Oh, one more thing. I am now officially, I've been an aunt, but I now have a nephew, which is super exciting. So that's been really cool. I've dealt with girls all the time. But it's cool to have a nephew. But we're going to get started. I do want to say that I am in a different location recording. And so hopefully there's not too many noises. I'm going to do my best to edit it out. I know that this bird is near my window. And of course, when I start recording, it's super loud. So if you hear the bird, I'm sorry. But if you like birds, then there you go. A little different sound to the podcast today. So, today we're going to talk about how we can manage the inner critic. I want you to think about what an inner critic means to you. I'm going to give you a couple of seconds. Okay. So today I wanted to talk about the inner critic because I realized that it's something that I think a lot of people deal with. And if we're not aware of it, we will think of it as just a part of us, something that we have to deal with the rest of our lives, which, don't get me wrong, an inner critic doesn't go away, but how we manage it, we can change how we see the inner critic. We could change how we listen to the inner critic. We could change our perspective. So in this episode, I just hope that I'm able to change your perspective on the inner critic and help you to manage it, because it can be tough. You know, we go through things in life that we have no control over, and we develop these inner critics at a young age, which I'll go in more depth about. And then they are with us forever, and we just think that that's just how things should be. And maybe that's not how they should be. Maybe the inner critic isn't always right, you know? So today we're going to talk about how we can manage the inner critic. We're going to talk about what it is, explain why we have one, steps to manage it, and of course, we're going to end with some scripture verses. So, what is the inner critic? The inner critic, according to choosingtherapy.com, an inner critic tells you reasons you are not good enough based on painful early life experiences when you may have witnessed or experienced hurtful attitudes toward yourself or those close to you. So, that voice in your head that tells you you're not good enough, like, I kind of, when I was reading this, it made me think of like the imposter syndrome. Like, I think we experienced imposter syndrome because of like, yeah, our experience and everything we went through. Also, if you haven't listened to that, I recommend listening to that. That was a good episode. But I think our inner critic feeds it, right? Like, oh, you're not good enough. Oh, you're not qualified for this job. Oh, you're going to mess up that relationship. Remember, you messed up the last one. Like that voice, that negative voice. And it's there because of things we went through. Like, it's not just there to be mean. It's there because maybe when we were younger, we witnessed something traumatic or hurtful, and it's replaying in our mind, that voice. Or maybe we were younger, maybe it didn't happen to us, but it happened to someone around us, and we learn that that's the way things are, and our minds adapt to that. And the inner critic is just gonna keep reminding us of, oh, you can't do it, you're not qualified, you don't have the degree, you're not good enough, you messed up the last relationship, you did this, you did that. And it's just that negative voice. The article also talks about how the self-critical inner voice is persistent. And this is so true, because when I started to learn more about, as I got more into my healing journey and I went to therapy and different things, I realized that like I was able to separate it. And I think that's where we're going to learn to not allow it to consume us, is that we separate it. We name it. Okay, inner critic, like, nope, that's the inner critic. That's not who I am. That's not the truth, right? And the inner critic is persistent. It is constantly talking to us, and it continues to judge us constantly. Like, oh, you're really going to take that job? You know you ain't got that degree. Why would you even apply for that? Like, it's almost, I kind of think of it kind of like a bully. At least mine is. Like, I now can separate it. I'm not perfect. I still have days where I believe the inner critic, because it is persistent. Like, you hear it constantly all the time. And to some degree, some of the things it said might have been true in the past. But because of where I am now, and hopefully as you develop and continuously heal on your journey, you will realize that it doesn't have to dictate your day. It doesn't have to dictate your life. It kind of reminds me of like with the negative thoughts, right? Like, I had an episode about how to manage, I think it was intrusive or negative thoughts. And it's like, okay, like, yeah, you acknowledge it. Like, all right, I hear you, inner critic. I hear you saying I can't get the job, but I'm going to apply anyway. So it is persistent, and it's judging us. The article also talks about how mental health challenges can evolve from it. It can flood us with negative feelings and emotions. And the inner critic can be linked to self-sabotage and stress. And anxiety disorders can be related to ongoing negative messages from the inner critic. And I really do believe that statement, because I also did an episode on self-sabotage. So if you haven't listened to that one, I recommend it. And it's amazing how all these things are interconnected, right? Like that inner critic is telling us we're not good enough. So then we self-sabotage. We don't think we're good enough. So then we might purposely start doing behaviors so that we don't get the job. Like, I'm not going to apply, or you get the job and you have to do it because you don't think you really belong there. So that inner critic really does feed these self-sabotaging behaviors and stress that we go through, and anxiety disorders, because it's constantly just negative, and then you constantly feel like you have to prove yourself, or you constantly self-sabotage, and it's a cycle. But how do we end this cycle? We have to become aware of it. And I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going to get to the ways that can help us, but it is a cycle. It really is. We live in that constant cycle of self-doubt and self-blame. You doubt yourself because the inner critic is reminding you of maybe something that happened when you were younger or something you've seen, right? And then you blame yourself when things don't go right. Like, it's a constant cycle. The article also talks about how self-critical thinking facilitates emotional lows that can develop into mental health crises like depression or anxiety. Think about it. If we have, let's even think about if we had a parent that constantly says, you're not good enough, you're not going to do this, you're not going to do that, remember this, remember that, bring in all the negatives, how can you not feel depressed, right? But I think some of the hardest battles sometimes is the battles in our minds and the battles we go through internally, because we cannot run away from ourselves. It's the hardest thing. And what about when that negative voice, when that bullies yourself? What do you do? How do you run away from it? And at the end of the day, so that's what some people try to do. They try to run away from it. That's when we get the workaholics. That's when we get the people pleasers. That's when we get all these things to get away from that. But at the end of the day, you can't run away from yourself. You can work yourself to death and burn yourself out. You can people please and then give to everyone else but yourself. But at the end of the day, you're not addressing the root. And at the end of the day, this feeling came from somewhere, something that you went through as a child, and it's up to us to dig a little deeper to figure out why. Why is my inner critic so negative? Why am I being a bully to myself? And I want to share a little story with you. I didn't even understand. I didn't even know I had a negative inner critic until I went to therapy. This is, during the time I was having the breaking moment at my lowest. And I remember it took, my family encouraging me, like, why don't you go see someone? And, that whole story, I can't go see someone. That means I'm crazy. What are people going to think? Blah, 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 blah. I ended up going because I knew that what I was doing wasn't working and I wanted to feel better. I remember going to therapy, and I can't remember which session this was, but it was one of the beginning sessions. And as I'm talking to my therapist, she goes, why are you so self-critical of yourself? And I'm like, what do you mean self-critical? Like, this is just who I am. She's like, you're so hard on yourself. Like, this is an example. Like, if I ran a mile in 6 minutes, right, which is a good time, or 6 minutes and something seconds, I'm always like, nah, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. And, I know sometimes it's good to push yourself, but nothing I did was good enough. So it was like I was always running around with my head chopped off. And I had this mindset for everything I did, whether it was sports, whether it was school, whether it was relationships, whether it was friendships, whether it was at home with my family, whether it was doing something new. I had to be better. I have to do better. I have to do better. It's not good enough. It's not good enough. And then if something good happens, it was like, oh, you don't even deserve it. Now you got to prove you have to do it. And see how exhausting, like, just talking about this makes me exhausted. And I realized she was right. I am self-critical. And I adapted this mindset that was just who I was, because that's how I've always been. But it wasn't until a third party, not my mom, not my dad, not my friends, not anyone that was close to me, but someone outside looking in and hearing me and saying, why are you so self-critical? It was almost impossible to please myself, because my bar was unrealistic and I kept moving the goalposts. So I say that to say, like, sometimes we just adapt that's who we are, but we have to separate it. And it wasn't until she pointed it out to me, and I never, ever forget this, that I literally left her like, wait, I am. And then now I see it. I'm like, whoa, Regine, you're doing a little too much. Or not even Regine, whoa, inner critic, oh, whoa, like that's a little too much. Like, I try to separate it, because that is not all Regine is. And that's unfair to me to be like that. And I realized that that came from somewhere. I didn't just come out of the room like, I need to be like this. I got to prove myself. I'm not good enough. You don't just come out the womb like that. Like, things have happened to you. And then when I replayed things of why am I so hard on myself? Because I can't lie, like, that opened my eyes. And I literally was like, I remember talking to my mom about it. And then, like, just therapy really helped me to open my eyes to things. And another thing that I realized was, like, I was so, like, I seen my worth in things. Like, she asked me, who are you? And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm an athlete. I got the dean's list. Oh yeah, I was, like, all these things instead of like who I am. Like, nah, I'm more than just trying to be an All-American. I'm more than these things. I'm more than athletes. But that's how I thought things had to be at a young age. So I realized that I was so self-critical because at a young age, I learned that who I wasn't good enough for everyone. Because I didn't fit in places, I realized that I adapted that people-pleasing mindset, that I adapted that put people above myself mindset. So then I became so self-critical that I had to be good enough for everyone else but who I was. And then I was living this life that I had to please everyone else. I had to be what everyone else wanted me to be but myself. So that's where it came from. And I realized that because I didn't fit in a lot of places I was. And I really think that's where a lot of these things come from, because if I'm not good enough when I was 4, 5, 6, whatever, how am I going to be good enough at 25? That inner critic doesn't leave. That inner child doesn't leave you. Those experiences happen, So it's up to us to change how we see it and to validate it. Like, yes, that did happen. And one thing that's hard in this journey is just accepting it. Because sometimes you just want to be like, ugh, like, why did I believe that? Right? But I have to have sympathy for that inner child who adapted that mindset, because that's what kept her safe. That's what kept her, feeling love, was like, okay, the minute I do what everyone wants me to do, that's when I'm like. Because when I showed up as Regine, that wasn't good enough. When I showed up as Regine, you didn't fit in there. So then I was like, oh yeah, no. I have to do what everyone else wants. So I say that to say that this mindset comes from somewhere. Something that happened to you, or something that happened to someone around you at a young age. And then it just continues to, grow with us as we grow up until we become aware of it and we say, no, we're breaking that cycle. So some examples, I kind of named some, but I'm an imposter. I'm not good enough. I don't deserve this. Those are constant things that the negative inner critic might say. There's some other ones too. I mean, if I had my journal, or if I had a piece of paper and I kept it with me all day, I could have a page list of negative things my inner critic says about me. But those are just some things. So why do we have it? I kind of shared it, but according to psychcentral.com, it's usually the early experiences that we might have with primary caregivers, or just early experiences in life. We might internalize how they see us. Their voice and how they perceive things is how we see ourselves. So it could be stemmed from maybe how your caregiver's seeing you. I know for me, I had, my whole family was in sports. So I had a dad who was always like, come on, we got to get better, which I'm grateful for that characteristic I had. But the thing about when you're young, sometimes we don't know how to separate, okay, what we strive for better, but then eventually, like, we got to stop. So I adapted this mindset that I have to keep doing. I have to keep getting better. I have to be better than this person. I have to be better than that person. So sometimes it's how our parents sees us, or how we grew up. It also can be because of society. This is big. Society norms and rules. There's so many, you have to look this way. And there's things with race. There's things with income. There's things with religion. There's just so many things that society says we have to be. And I think this is a big thing too. And I know this was a big thing for me. I realized when Regine showed up to places, that wasn't how society, I felt like I wasn't who society wanted me to be. Like, it was hard. It was hard. It's hard because society will say you have to have this timeline, you have to act this way, you have to listen to this music, you have to be like this. But why? Why do we give society so much credit or so much hold over our lives? Like, one of the best things I think I did was limit how much social media access I have. Or I'm not gonna say I don't watch or go on social media, because I do. But one thing in my healing journey that I'm proud of myself, I have been pretty consistent for the most part, is limiting social media access, because you can get so consumed with people's lives. Oh, look at them. They have more money than me. When I have money, I'll be happy. Oh, look at them. Look at the relationship. When I get married, I'll be happy. And it's like, no, happiness can be right where you are now. If you keep thinking it's going to be when you get the next thing, when you get what they have, you won't be. I'm saying that from experience, because so much of my life was, I'll be happy when, I'll be happy when, I'll be happy when. No. And that's what I think for society makes you feel like, oh, look at them, they're skinnier than me. Or, oh my gosh, they have a better body than me. If I strive for that, then I'll be happy. No, it's about you working with what you have now. What can you point out what's a strength that you have right now? What can you point out that you like about yourself now? Because it's who you are right now, you know? And I'm not saying we can't strive for things, but if we put our happiness in one thing, we will never be happy. And I think society tricks our minds to think that we have to have what everyone else has. Or we start comparing ourselves to them, like, oh, look at them. They have this, they have that. And then we become depressed, right? And then there's an inner critic. Look, you'll never be like them. Or you'll be happy if you're like them. Or you'll never be good enough to be them. Like, it just feeds negativity to us. So that's kind of why we have this negative inner critic. Our early life experiences could be with peers, could be with caregivers, and then society. Big on the peers, because that's one of the reasons why I think I started not to feel like I was good enough, because I was different than my peers. I didn't like the same music. I didn't like the same things. And then I realized, like, now looking back, I can see where I literally, it's crazy how when you do the work, you can see it, you know? And it's hard to look back and to accept it sometimes, but I can see where I was myself, and I can see where I started to people please, and I started to do the things that other people were doing, because I thought that what Regine was doing wasn't good enough. I thought I was the oddball out, but I learned that everyone's different, and it's about, the real beauty is being yourself, and then finding people that accept you for you, not you fitting into their narrative, because then you're living a life that isn't filled with you, and you matter, right? Everyone is designed on this world for a reason. And I think if we keep being like everyone else, then how can we see the beauty of what we can do in the world, right? God called all of us for different reasons. And just because their reason is different than yours, my reason is different than your reason, that doesn't mean it's wrong. That just means we have different things to bring in the world. And I think looking at it from that perspective can change the mindset of comparison, the mindset of I'm not good enough. Good enough for what? Maybe you're not supposed to be at this place. Maybe you're supposed to be here, because that's where God called you to be, you know? So I think we lose our true selves when we experience that hurt, when we experience that pain, when we experience that heartbreak, when we start people pleasing, when we have the parental expectations. I was listening to a podcast by Sarah Jakes, love her. And I think it was her and Anita. I can't remember, but all I know is they were talking about how when we're born, you know, we have that, think about it, we're a child, we have that childlike mindset. And then we have all these things that hit us, right? We have the parent expectations. We have maybe, bullying. We have maybe, we lose someone. We have all these things that life happens to us, that then it changes who we really are. And I think the inner critic is because of all the things we went through, right? And it just constantly judges us, and it constantly critiques us on how we need to be, how to protect ourselves, how to do this, how to do that. But it's negative, you know? And I think that's why we have to do some work. We have to do some work to overcome all these things that have happened to us, because they are valid, and it did hurt, and it is unfair. But if we don't do the work, then we allow our minds to keep playing victim. And then we keep the cycle going, and we keep listening to the inner critic, and we keep self-sabotaging, and we keep people pleasing, and we keep living up to other people's expectations, but what we want. And then we live a life where we were unhappy. We live a life where we look back and we say, wait, where was I? Where did I do anything that I even liked? Where did I do God's work? Like, we lived a life where we just lived what society wanted us to live, or lived how our parents want us to live, right? So I think we all have to do work. And that's why, like, I do think that probably everyone needs to go to therapy, because everyone has had something happen to them or someone they love and it's impacted them. Like, with being a family-based therapist, like, secondary trauma is real, you know? Like, you can hear something from someone you're so close to or witness something, and it can negatively impact you. Like, I could even think about, here's a good example. The other day, so, you know, we see the things that's happening with cops. So I can't lie. Sometimes I have a fear of like, oh, what will happen if, you know, someone I love or me, I get pulled over. You know, these what ifs goes through our mind. We don't live in fear, but, you know, things have happened. So the other day I was driving with my mom and dad. We went to see my nephew, and we got pulled over, and literally my mind was racing of like, oh my gosh, what if this happens? And me and my family, we're Black. So, you know, I'm like, oh my gosh, what if? Nothing happened, thank God. But like, I say that to say things around us affect us. What we see on social media negatively affects us. What we see around us in our homes and with our friends affect us. And that inner critic can feed off of things not only that we went through, but also things around us. So I think our inner critic, it critiques us to be like what we know, or what sometimes everyone else expects instead of who we should really be. It's critiquing us to maybe be the person that people want us to be instead of being the person that we should be. And that's why I think so much of it is just changing the perspective. Like, no, I am good enough for this. Nope, I am good enough for this. Nope, I'm not listening to that because I heard this before and I pushed through. So how do we manage it? How do we manage this negative inner critic that a lot of people probably have, and it ain't going to just go away, right? I think self-awareness. I say that with everything, because if we're not aware of something, how can we fix it? If we don't even know it's there. It wasn't until my therapist back when I was in my undergrad, so that was, I think, 2017. No. Oh my gosh. That's when I graduated high school. That was 2022. 2022, I don't know. 2022 or 2021, whatever it was. My therapist asked me, why are you so self-critical on yourself? Why are you so hard on yourself? It wasn't until someone pointed it out. Now I'm aware of it. Now I can tell when that voice is being a little too hard on myself. Like, oh, wait, Regine, we did the best we could today. That doesn't mean that I'm not a good person. That doesn't mean that I'm not qualified. Like, no. So we have to become aware. And becoming aware, you might still be like, oh, no, I don't have that. But it might take someone else to say it. And that's okay. It's okay that someone else points it out. Like, hey, like, I noticed that you're really hard on yourself. That's okay that if someone else points it out. I don't think I would have picked up on it if my therapist didn't point it out, because everyone that really is close to me knows that, like, I'm always that. I'll do it. I'll figure it out. I push hard. I push to the end of, like, I that's just who I am. So I don't even know if they would have pointed it out, because so many people might think that that's a part of who I am. And yes, the hard working part of me is true, but that negative self-critical person, I don't want to be that, because at the end of the day, outside looking in, I realized that being that person outside looking in might look good to some people, like, oh, she's a hard worker, da-da-da. But deep down, how do you think I felt? Like I said, I think of it as like that bully or that coach that just nonstop, like, come on, you got to do better, you got to do better, you got to do better. It's exhausting. It will burn you out. It causes you to not feel good enough. And I don't want that for myself. I deserve more than just being that mean to myself and bullying myself, right? So self-awareness is key, because it allows you to even recognize that there's a problem so that you can fix it, so that you can work through it, so that you can get help for it. The next thing I think is finding the root of the negative talk. why is this happening? I told you mine. I know why I have a negative inner critic. And because I know why, it helped me in my journey. It helps me to have compassion for myself and not judge myself, because I know why I adapted this mindset, because of things that I went through, because of how I thought I needed to be for others, right? So I encourage you to figure out why is it even there? And that could be just journaling, doing a brain dump and just throwing things down that the negative critic says. And then maybe based off what the negative critic is telling you, it might be able to tie to something that you experienced as a child, and you can connect it. And that's just going to help you have compassion for that little child that was doing the best that they could, right? But I encourage you, write down maybe the thoughts that you were thinking. What feelings are you feeling that's present? What's happening in the moment? Where are you at? Like, do you notice that that negative critic is more present when you're on social media, when you're around certain people, when you're in certain environments? Like, I want us to do some homework, because it's going to help us in the long run. It's going to help us to figure out, where is all this negativity? Where's this inner critic that's telling me I'm not good enough? Where's it coming from? So that goes into the inner work, Maybe once you figure it all out, maybe writing a note to your younger self. I found this very helpful, because it allows me to validate that little girl or that little boy, did the best they could with what they knew. And it's up to me now to be the person I need to be for that child, that child that went through all those things, right? It's not for me to be judgmental, because too much judgment and criticism, it doesn't make us feel good. And I think we have to get to a point where, we can look at that child and just see like, they did the best. Maybe it could be looking at a picture of your younger self. I know I have one on the front of my phone, and I always try to, when I'm feeling super hard on myself, look at that little girl and just say kind words. I try. It's not always easy, but I do try. Practice self-kindness. We know what that is, being kind to yourself. But just being kind, like, you did the best you could. I want us to also highlight the positives. It's so easy in this world. So many things happen between, people dying, the election, this news report, that news report. So many things happen in our day that are negative or that consume our brains. I want us to try to highlight a positive. There's a statement that my therapist gave me that I think I shared before that I want to share with you. Even though ... nevertheless. So even though I'm struggling, even though I don't feel confident right now, nevertheless, I'm still going to try to apply. I'm still going to get up and do the best I can, because at the end of the day, at least you can say you tried. At least you can highlight that you're trying. It's easy to say, I'm not going to do it because I'm not good enough. But what if you say, you can acknowledge that. I don't feel good enough right now, but I'm going to try to still apply. The worst that can happen is what? You don't get that job, but there might be more jobs out there. So we have to change how we talk to ourselves. And because we already have so many negativity around us, we have to be our positive light, and because it's so easy to get caught up in the negatives around the world, and then we're consumed, right? Another thing that I think can help us is therapy. I'm an advocate for therapy, because that's what helped me to get where I am. And no, I'm not perfect, and I still have hard days, and I still have days where it feels like I went back to 20 steps back, right? But I realize in therapy, it has even gave me the opportunity to see things that I've never seen, to have hope, to get coping skills that have helped me. It just provides an opportunity that I really encourage you to try. Not even just for the negative critic. You might say, I don't have a negative critic. Oh, okay. Maybe you're struggling with depression. Maybe you're struggling with anxiety. Like, remember, it's linked to things. This negative inner critic can be connected to that depression. If you're constantly being negative, how can't you feel depressed? You just constantly just point out the negatives in yourself, right? I want you to think about this. Someone gives you a compliment. Are you like, nah, my outfit's ugly. Nah, like, that's negative, right? Like, why can't you take a compliment? And I'm not saying that to come at your neck, but that's something that I realize. People will compliment me, and I will bring myself down. Oh, I like that shirt. Oh, your hair looks good. It looks all right. My shirt's a little, it's whatever. Like, why can't I say thank you? These are questions I ask myself. Why can't I accept a compliment? Do I literally have no confidence in myself? Do I not think I look good enough? So therapy, and then another thing, maybe find support from someone who can encourage you. So maybe that's a friend, maybe that's your parents, maybe that's your spouse, maybe that's your cousin. I don't know. But try to find someone that can encourage you and help you point out things and be a support. Someone that can support you and uplift you, but not bring you down. I also wanted to share this because I think sometimes our minds can get a little like confused. So there's a difference between constructive criticism and negative self-critic. So constructive criticism, which is, what a lot of jobs look for. So with constructive criticism, it's a comment or something being said that can help you. It's a helpful way to say something's wrong so that it can be improved. It's not to bring you down like you don't do this good. So I want us to realize it's two different things. Constructive criticism, like, if you're at a job and your boss is like, oh, I really like how you incorporated the logo and this on the PowerPoint, but next time maybe we can just make it a little bigger. So it's still highlighting what you're doing right, but it's making room for improvement. Whereas the negative inner critic is just judging you and critiquing you and literally bringing you down. There's no improvement. It's just, you're not good enough. There's no, maybe next. No, you're not good enough. You're not going to make it. It's negative. So there's a difference. I wanted to highlight that. I got that from the dictionary.cambridge.org, but I wanted to highlight that because, it is good to be able to take constructive criticism, and we can be like that with ourselves. Like, hey, Regine, next time, I like how we did this, but next time I want to do this so that this can happen. That's different. But you saying, oh, you're not good enough, you suck, you didn't even make it to the mark, like that's negative. That's what will bring you down. So I wanted to highlight that because it can be a little confusing. The scripture verse I want to talk about today is, I want to talk about it because I realized that when I deal with these negative self-talk and the negative inner critic and stuff like that, I realized that what has helped me is the Bible, because if my voice is negative, I need something that's positive to be deposited in me to encourage me, to let me know that I'm not those things, right? And what better thing than the Bible? So the Bible verse I want to share with you is Ephesians chapter 4, verse 22 through 24. And I'll be reading from the ESV version, which is the English Standard Version. It says, to put off your old self, which belongs to your former manner of life and is corrupt through deceitful desires, and to be renewed in the spirit of your minds, and to put on the new self, created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness. So I wanted to share this because in the Bible, it talks about this is talking about renewing your mind, renewing your spirit. So God knew that we would go through things, that we would be sinful, that we would have these negative thoughts, that we would go through these things. So he put it in the Bible that we need to renew our minds. That means renewing means to make new again. So we have to constantly, every day, renew. Feed our mind with positivity. Feed our mind with God's word, because if not, the sin's going to be there. Like, we live in a sinful world. The negativity is always going to be there. God is literally saying that we have to renew it. We have to make it new every day. So it's not abnormal that you have a negative inner critic. I want to say that. It's not abnormal that you are going through temptations and that you sin, because God says we have to renew our minds. We have to renew it. So that means we have to make it new constantly, because of the world, because of who our old self is. Think about it. Our old self, the kid or the child that went through the things, that went through the abuse, that went through the rape, that went through all these things, the former self, the old life that we used to live is corrupt, and it can be deceitful. It can be not trusted. It can be misleading. It can lie to us, right? So we have to renew our spirits and make it new. We have to feed ourselves with positivity. We have to feed ourselves with God's word so that we can not only feel positivity, but also be renewed and be like how God wants us to be. So we can be the likeness of God. That's what I see in that verse. That shows me that before my inner critic goes and says, oh, you're weird for even having to renew your mind. Nope. God says I have to renew it. So it's normal that we are going through negativity, that we go through sins, And it's up to us to renew it. It's up to us to fill our spirits and ourselves up with positivity or with God's word. So in those moments, I like to remind myself, because I now know I have to renew my mind, so when my mind says, that negative inner critic says, you're not good enough, I say, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Why? Because Psalms 139:14 says, I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. When that negative inner critic says, you can't do this, you're too weak, you don't have what it takes, you're going to mess up, no one in your family's done it, how you think you're going to do it, I can say, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Philippians chapter 4, verse 13. When that negative inner critic says, God's mad at you, God this, God that, you're not going to be able to do this, this isn't this, whatever it says, I can say, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope in a future. God isn't here to hurt me. God isn't here to harm me. He wants to prosper me, give me hope and a future. So that means I'm here in this moment doing this for a reason, despite what I feel, despite the anxiety that comes, despite the negative talk. I'm here for a reason, because God's giving me hope and a future, and he's not here to hurt me. So I say that to say, this is how I fight my negative inner critic. And hopefully it helps you to fight yours. Feeding myself positivity. So changing what I'm watching on TV, looking at inspiring things. But number one, I use the word, because God says I have to renew my mind. So I'm renewing it with verses that will fight against what I'm going through. So when I do feel I'm not good enough, I tell myself I'm fearfully, wonderfully made, because that's what God said about me, not what the negative inner critic says about me. When I feel like I'm not good enough to do this podcast, because I did feel that way before. Like, who am I to get on this mic and to talk to people? Who am I? I am called. I am a child of God. And I know that God isn't going to put me in a place to harm me. He's going to give me hope in a future. So I'm going to close, but I encourage you to do the work. One, do the work. Figure out, why are you so negative to yourself? Why? God made you fearfully, wonderfully made. He loves you. Why are you so negative? Why do you think you're not good enough when he's called you, when he has plans for you? And our plans and our thoughts are not like God's. His thoughts and his plans are greater than ours. So I challenge you, I encourage you to become aware of it first, but also to do the work. Where is it coming from? Because where it's coming from will help you to give the compassion to yourself. So then you can spot it on where it's coming from, but also to renew your mind, renew it with positivity, renew it with God's word, renew it with things that fill you up, not with the social media negativity. If you're depressed and you're going through stuff, I don't want you to keep listening to negative things. I want you to find things that fills you up. So I encourage you guys, because where there's some things that are out of our control, right? We can't control every thought we have. We can't control this. We can't control that. We can't control what's happening in the world, but we can control what we feed ourselves. We can control what we believe, what we say to ourselves, what we say to others. So I hope that this was helpful to you, and I hope that you stay encouraged, and I hope you realize that you aren't those negative things, and that negative inner critic does not have to win each day. You can push through this, and it's going to be there, and this isn't going to be easy. And you might find that doing more work leads to it being more negative, because you're pushing through it, right? You're pushing through it, and you're not allowing it to dictate your day anymore. And that's a good thing. So I encourage you, and I hope that you guys have a blessed month, because I won't talk to you again for another month, and a blessed day, a blessed week. And if you need more encouragement, I'm here. I have all my episodes, but also I have an Instagram page, the Breaking Moment Podcast. I encourage you to check it out. Sometimes I post inspiring things. You can reach out to me. I'm rooting for you guys. I love you guys. And I hope that you have a good rest of your day. I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye. Thank you for listening to the Breaking Moment Podcast. If this information was helpful, please share it with others. And if you enjoy listening, subscribe to the podcast so you can get the latest episodes. You can listen to the Breaking Moment Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast.